Muy buenas tardes a todos y muchas gracias por esta oportunidad de hablar con todos ustedes en el tema de comunicaciones multiculturales de negocios. I'm going to speak in English. I hope that will be all right with everyone. Hi, my name is Jennifer Burge and my company is WorldWise Consulting. And I'm just going to have you all stare at this screen for as long as possible, apparently. Technical difficulties, folks. Yeah. Okay, perfecto. Lo que es importante, what is important on this particular slide is that I come to you today with 25 years of international business experience across 18 countries. This is the reason why I know a little bit about this topic, and it's not my first rodeo. I've been working in Mexico now, a country which I very much love. It is my 7th country of residence for 5 years. Last year, about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I relocated to Mexico City. So WorldWise is based in Mexico City now. So I love being at Discoveries because it is awesome to be in a room full of such intelligent people, and especially awesome to be in that room in Mazatlán. I've stood on the stage before at Discoveries and talked about how improved communication could have prevented the dynamiting of 55,000-year-old Aboriginal rock art in Western Australia. I have also talked about how improved communication perhaps could have saved lives when a tailings dam collapsed in Brazil. So I brought these examples of communication to the stage multiple times. And this time I thought I would talk about an example, or at least lead with an example that could be more close to home. So what happens when communication fails? I'm sure that many of you in this room were in Acapulco last October when we had a small event called Hurricane Otis. Otis came to town on October the 24th. The day started beautifully, right? The skies in Acapulco are amazing. Beautiful sunrise. I was staying at a condo complex off the golf course of the Mayan Palace. So I always love going over to the Mayan Palace because it's beautiful, right? And it was close to Day of the Dead. I was looking forward to being at the conference and seeing all my friends in the mining community. So everything started off beautifully. About noon that day, I was standing on the beach at the Mayan Palace, and I got the first text message from a friend saying, "Hey, is everybody excited about the hurricane? What are y'all doing about the hurricane?" And I'm thinking to myself, what hurricane? Didn't even know about it. So what I did get was a link about the progression of the hurricane at that time was supposed to be a tropical depression. Nothing more than a bit of rain, and everything would carry on. I wasn't really worried about it, to be quite honest with you. So this is the reason why near 7 p.m. that night, I found myself in a room full of all of your colleagues at the inauguration in Acapulco. So the rain started coming, that was for sure. I think everybody who was there that day noticed that it wasn't typical rain. During that inauguration session, I received another text message from a friend saying, "Where are you staying? Are you at a beach hotel?" She wanted to make sure that I wasn't in a beach hotel. And then she told me that now the hurricane was a Category 4. And I'm in this room full of people at the inauguration, getting bits and pieces of information about what's happening outside. After the inauguration, as all of us tried to climb down the stairs, which had then become a river, in the exhibition hall, over to the expo hall, it was pouring so badly that my friends and I only had 2 friends that were there who knew exactly where I was staying. We were looking at the rain coming down harder and harder and thinking, okay, pretty soon these roads are going to be flooded. We're going to need to go. And by 11 o'clock that night, this is the last picture that I have on my phone. By 11 o'clock that night, we had no power, no water, and no cell signal. So that's what we call a communication failure, right? What do you do in that situation What do you do in that situation where this is what you wake up to the next day? And you can't call anybody, nobody can call you. It was really weird. I was in this complex and there were like no people. I don't know how many people actually own these places, but there was nobody around. So me and an iguana were having a staring contest most of the day, but that morning, the reason I was in Acapulco is because I was supposed to moderate a panel with two ambassadors, the ambassador of Australia and the ambassador of New Zealand, as well as some of our esteemed colleagues from the mining industry. And I woke up thinking, okay, I'm looking at this outside, but this could be localized. This could be just here where I am. So I washed my hair in the sink, I put on my dress, I walked across to the golf course, and went to the Mayan Palace, where it was clear that it was not just a local event. Like, these are not even the worst pictures. I'm sure many of you know what it looked like at that time. So I walked through the hallways of the Mayan Palace, and I talked to a couple of guys with mining t-shirts and asked them if they knew what was going on at the expo. Were we going to have the conference or not? Did anyone know? And nobody did know. Most people were just dragging around their luggage, which was completely soaking wet from wherever it had to be dragged from that night. That was the immediate concern. But when I saw the palace, I figured out pretty quickly probably the expo wasn't on. So then I went back to my place. As I said, I stared at the iguana for a while, and he stared at me, and he wondered what I was doing there, and I wondered why he wasn't on top of a roof somewhere. But there was this beautiful sunset, so I thought, okay, I'm going to go outside and take a picture of that, because at least it's something that I can smile about. At least it's something that's going to make me happy. So I go outside. Sorry about this microphone thing. I should have done this a little bit better. Haha. So I walked outside, and for the first time I saw some other people. And it was a guy walking with his wife, and he was carrying a 20-liter bottle of water. So I was like, hey, how are you? Who are you? What's going on? So I start chatting with this guy. And he tells me that both of the towers at the airport are down, and nobody knows when the cell communication will come back. Nobody knows anything about when any of this is going to be restored. But he was very kind, and they gave me the number, the unit he was in. He said that most of the complex wasn't occupied, that's why there was nobody around. But he gave me the number of his door and said, if you need anything, come by. And then he carried 20 liters of water into my place for me and went and got another one, which was awesome. So what happens next? The two friends, the only ones who know where I'm actually at, came knocking on my door the next day when we could actually leave and said, get your stuff, let's go. So we start to go around the city of Acapulco, and we are going to various hotels where we're still looking for some of our friends, trying to find out, we didn't know where anybody was. Were you safe? Were you not safe? Did you need anything? Are you injured? So we're yelling in hallways and airports and calling people's names, not being able to locate anyone. Obviously not the greatest communication scenario. So what did we do? We drove out. We needed a boat, but we drove out of there. And I'm sure most of you had the same experience. Getting about 1.5 hours away from Acapulco, then all of a sudden the messages started to come in. The phone service came back. All of a sudden I had at least 50 messages from people asking, was I safe? Where was I? Did I need help? Actually, one of the first people that I heard from was Douglas Coleman and his wife Adelina. They were already organizing transportation out of Acapulco for the people who needed it. There were several mining companies that were organizing transportation. People were in action all over the place, communicating, collaborating, and getting already positive results in the wake of a complete disaster. What if the last words I ever say on the stage are disaster? Seriously think your clicker needs a new battery, amigo? Aye, okay. Fifth time's a charm, apparently. What did we learn? Effective communication solves problems. Good communication does not happen by accident and takes a great deal of effort. Listening to all perspectives increases the probability of creative solutions. Reliable communication increases organization. Organization leads to positive results. All of this takes effort. All of this takes concerted effort. And if you talk to anybody who was there, the stories will amaze you about the solutions that people came up with to get out of Acapulco, to help someone else, to go get transport. Everyone's story is completely different than the next, and they are all fascinating. But it shows really how inventive we can all be when we work together as a team. And it's unfortunate that it took a disaster situation for us to do that, but that was the result. Lack of communication just creates fear and tension and increases anxiety for everyone. So if you can imagine we knew that this hurricane was coming. It was bearing down on everyone. So there was a certain amount of tension in the air the entire time because no one really knew what exactly the situation was going to be and what we should do about it. So to say that we could be frustrated and perhaps there could have been deadly consequences is not an exaggeration. So it's everyone's responsibility to make others feel included. Why is all of this relevant? Why is it important? The amount of nearshoring, friendshoring, ally shoring, all the shoring is bringing to Mexico all sorts of nationalities, many different nationalities. Predominantly, what I've learned most about has been Americans. I looked for percentages to find out, because if you go to any immigration office, you'll find there are many different nationalities trying to get into Mexico and get residency. So this data that I found was mostly applicable to the US, I think because we're such close neighbors. But one friend told me that the number of temporary residency or residency permit applications from Americans to live in Mexico quadrupled last year. The impact has been enormous in Mexico City, where I'm based now. The amount of increasing our closeness and teams, building more multicultural teams, adding more people to the mix with have very different perspectives, because we're all born with or grow up within a completely different lens in various countries. Many of the people in this room are very international people who have switched countries, who have traveled around, who have seen lots. And so all of you know that your lens, your particular lens that you are born and raised and educated to see through requires adjustment when you move countries. It requires that you pay attention to what's going on around you and that you adapt yourself to the environment. The environment is not there to adapt itself to you. So with all of these foreigners coming into Mexico City, and Mexico, it's creating a little bit of friction. The number of international ventures that fail due to cultural difference, 70%. Executives from 68 countries who say cross-cultural management is their biggest challenge, 90%. So these other figures are more or less relevant, but I think those two say itself, and this comes from theeconomist.com. I didn't write this myself yesterday. So what's the return on investment? If we are actually going to take it seriously and give our people and our teams and our leaders the intercultural skills to build stronger, better teams and foundations for the work that we need to do in another country, what's the return on investment? Greater productivity, improved team performance, leadership, competitive advantage for sure. If you understand the host country that you're working in, the culture, the language, lo siento para mi español, pero if you understand the environment that you're operating in, you definitely have an advantage over all of the activity coming internationally that comes after you. Better decision making, enhanced personal judgment, adaptability. Adaptability is a great word, and a great skill. The more that you can be present and involved and communicate with and form relationships with people that are different than you, have different experiences than you, you completely grow from this experience, you learn, and you become smarter. So in numbers, the risk of not investing in intercultural training is greater than the cost of it. Loss of valued talent costs up to 200% of annual salary to replace. 200%. As I said before, lack of skills and poor communications are the top reasons for project failure. And it is proven that culturally unaware teams are underperformed by 40%, up to 40%. This other section here, which talks about cultural quiet quitting, was something that I hadn't even heard about, and I've been talking about this particular theme for the past 5 years. This is when employees experience cross-cultural clashes, lose a sense of belonging, and emotionally or intellectually engage from their work while still staying on the payroll. This is estimated to cost up to 34% of that employee's salary. That's a pretty good chunk when people just check out and come to work every day just because they need to be there and they need the money. So how did we develop global leaders? What do we look for in leadership that is international and adaptable and flexible and all of these things? Cognitive complexity, the ability to practice good community management, someone who values people regardless of what their experience, where they come from, what their background, what's important is what they bring to the table, and what is important is bringing the best out of that person who comes to the table. Obviously, cross-cultural communication, language skills, etc. There is not a lot of research about global leadership, as much as we hear this talked about often in various business publications and such. There's often a discussion around global leadership, but to be truthful, there isn't very much information available about it. It needs to be a person, the global leader who is truly effective needs to be one who empowers others. I don't know about all of you, but I was told a long time ago that there's 2 ways to be successful. The first way is to take the credit, and the second is to give it. I believe in the second one wholeheartedly. Resilience, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes faux pas. You get back up again and you do it better the next time, which is actually kind of a difficult thing here in Mexico, where mistakes are carry more weight, and it's not culturally the same as it is in the United States, for example, where we're taught that we just learn from our mistakes and move on. So I have a bunch of slides here, which are basically the toolkit for how do you manage this better? How do you manage an intercultural team? How do you do that? What is the impact here in Mexico? So I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, otherwise it would take far too long. I'm happy to share the presentation or more information later. Pero for collectivist versus individualist, Mexico is a collectivist country where it's about the relationships. It's about the people around you, it's about the team, it's about your church, it's about your family, but it's about relationships. Whereas United States, Canada, Australia, countries like these countries, a lot of the Commonwealth countries, are individualistic, where it's me first, and it's me only, and it's just me. It's not an attitude that plays well in Mexico. High context and low context communication is very important here in Mexico. So you can see that the US is one of the, I always mess this up every single time. The United States being the most extreme low context culture. In Mexico, you can see somewhat it appears in the middle, but low context means, as people from the United States, for example, we spell out everything. We bullet point everything. We take notes about the meeting. We take notes about what happened at the meeting that happened later. We make sure that we put all of this in a contract. We document who is going to be responsible for that contract. And you understand my point. Nothing goes without being explained. And within Mexican culture, Mexico being high context, it's about reading the room. It's about reading the body language. It's about reading everything but what's on the paper. What you need to know about direct and indirect communication is that US, Canada, Mexico, we are direct communicators, so we say what we think. Indirect communication is that you'll hear no 57 times in Mexico without ever hearing the word no. So you have to be able to read what's happening. I was just giving the high signs. So power distance. US, Canada, Mexico are egalitarian countries, meaning we don't like to be hierarchical. We don't like to be one person in charge in a rigid structure. We like everybody to feel part of the equation. Well, in Mexico, which is a completely different hierarchical environment, what's important here is with that hierarchy comes clear communication structure. And when that communication structure is foggy for people, that means that they make independent decisions or they make no decisions because there's a lack of clarity. I think I'm going to go past all this, but what's important about masculine and feminine cultures and gender norms in Mexico, you can see the US and Mexico are pretty similar on this. 62 and 69 on the scale of masculinity means male-dominated, male traits tend to be representative of all industries. Privilege, what I ask you to look at this when I talk about privilege is that you recognize it if you have it. For example, I was in the immigration office not that long ago where I got through my process within a few hours, yet there are Haitian refugees in my neighborhood who are not able to get an interview to get residency in Mexico. That's privilege. So what do you want to do about it? Planning, strategy, education, action, evaluation. You have to keep moving. You have to keep reinforcing this. A couple of hours training session is not going to create behavioral change. It's impossible. This is my cheat sheet. If you remember nothing else, remember that establishing a connection with people, asking questions about them, being interested in who they are, will carry you a very long way. When you make a mistake later on that is something cultural, you are more easily forgiven once that relationship exists. People absolutely love talking about themselves, and it's a proven fact that whoever speaks more in any two-way communication walks away happier with the discussion, more satisfied. So thank you very much for listening. I hope I've given you a little bit of information to think about, and I'm glad to answer any questions off the stage. Thanks so much.